The clink of silverware stopped midair. Conversations froze. Every head turned toward the boy standing near table 9. 9-year-old Eli Hale, pale and trembling, stretched out his hand toward a black waitress in a crisp white shirt, Danielle Brooks. The piano in the corner had just started a slow, lilting tune. No one had seen it coming. Not the guests in their designer suits, not the hostess frozen beside the wine rack, and definitely not Grayson Hale, the billionaire CEO seated stiffly beside his son. In a restaurant where even joy needed a reservation, Eli's gesture landed like a thunderclap. The manager's sharp command sliced through the silence. "Miss Brooks, that's enough." But Danielle didn't flinch. She met the boy's eyes, saw the fear in his shoulders, the courage in his fingertips, and slowly removed her apron. The hush deepened. Her hand met his, and together, step by faltering step, they began to move. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but unmistakably. Together. Danielle Brooks had learned to disappear in plain sight. 5 years of late-night shifts, fake smiles, and balancing trays in heels had taught her that in places like the Marlowe Room, being invisible was the safest way to survive. It wasn't always this way. Once she was a dance therapy student at New York University with a thesis on movement autonomy and a part-time job helping kids with cerebral palsy find their rhythm. But life happened. Her mother's diagnosis, mounting bills, and a sister too young to carry the weight. It all led her here, waiting tables for people who never bothered to learn her name. Still, Danielle carried herself with quiet pride. She never begged, never explained. Her world wasn't built for grand entrances or spotlight moments. It was stitched together in silence, like teaching herself to stretch a dollar or stealing time between shifts to keep her old dance program afloat. When Eli reached out that night, it wasn't just a child asking for a dance. It was something she recognized on instinct, a flicker of need behind guarded eyes. No pity, not charity, a need to be seen. Danielle didn't say yes out of impulse. She said yes because it's what she's always done. Meet people where they are and let them lead, even if it's just for a moment. That kind of grace doesn't come from textbooks. It comes from being overlooked long enough to know exactly what it feels like, and never wanting someone else to feel the same. Grayson Hale didn't believe in chaos. His world was made of control, calculated, curated, and contained. As the founder of Hale Equity, he built his empire by outmaneuvering unpredictability, eliminating emotional noise, and turning risk into profit. He managed everything the same way he managed his schedule, his staff, and lately his son, with distance. Since the accident that left Eli's legs in braces and took his wife in one brutal flash of metal and silence, Grayson hadn't allowed room for spontaneity. Therapy sessions were booked with military precision. Progress was measured in numbers. Emotions were avoided like bad investments. So when he saw his son rise, trembling, in the middle of the restaurant and reach for a stranger's hand, his first reaction wasn't awe. It was fury. He didn't raise his voice, didn't slam the table. He didn't have to. Just one sharp look toward the manager, one clipped command, and the gears began turning to shut it down. Grayson wasn't unkind. He was efficient. He believed in experts and credentials and solving things with money and logic. But none of that had worked for Eli. Not really. And watching his son, smiling, leading, alive in a way he hadn't been in years, didn't make sense. Especially not with a waitress whose name he didn't even know. Something about the moment cracked the script he lived by. But he wasn't ready to admit it. Not yet. Not while the room watched. Not while the dance was still happening. Not while control was slipping. Danielle didn't guide him. She didn't try to steady his steps or mask the sound of the braces dragging across the marble floor. She just moved with him, adjusting her rhythm to match his, one uneven step at a time. Eli's shoulders were tense at first, his gaze flicking to the crowd that had gone silent around them. But then he caught the subtle nod from Danielle, the gentle smile that told him he wasn't being pitied. He was being trusted. Something shifted. His chin lifted. His hand tightened in hers. He took another step, then another. Not perfect, not even close, but they were his. Danielle let him lead, never once correcting him, never pulling him back into the safety of someone else's pace. And in that moment, a hush that had once felt heavy with judgment turned into something else. Reverence, awe, confusion. A woman at the next table whispered, "She's going to lose her job for this." But Danielle didn't hear it. She was listening to Eli's breathing, watching the way pride slowly replaced fear in his expression. Grayson sat frozen, hands clenched, as a memory flickered in. His wife spinning with Eli in their living room, her voice echoing, "It's not about getting the steps right, it's about letting him feel the music." When the song ended, Danielle bowed gently to Eli and said, "Thank you for the dance." And for the first time in 2 years, the boy smiled like he meant it. Danielle stepped into Hale Tower the next morning, wearing her best secondhand blazer and shoes that pinched at the heel. The lobby shimmered with marble and glass, and everyone moved like they were chasing the next million. She didn't belong there, and she knew it, but she also didn't flinch. At the security desk, she gave her name with a calm that didn't match the flutter in her chest. A young assistant escorted her to the top floor, offering a tight smile and a tone soaked in curiosity. Danielle knew the look, people trying to figure out if she was a mistake or a problem. When Grayson Hale finally entered the room, he didn't sit behind his desk. He stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the city as if it owed him something. Without looking at her, he asked, "Why did you say yes to my son?" Danielle didn't hesitate, because he needed to feel in control of something, even if just for a moment. That got his attention. He turned, studied her. "I've had Eli in every type of therapy money can buy. Nothing worked like last night, so I'll get to the point. I want you to work with him, full-time." He named a figure that made Danielle blink. More money than she'd seen in a year, but her voice stayed even. "I'm not a miracle worker, Mr. Hale, and I don't do puppetry. If you're looking to buy a solution, I'm not for sale." Grayson's jaw tensed. "Then why are you here?" Danielle met his gaze without blinking. "Because you invited me, and your son deserves better than people who are paid to pretend they care." Grayson didn't like being uncertain, yet there he was, sitting across from a waitress who just refused his offer like she had nothing to lose. He opened a manila folder and slid it across the table. Inside were photos of a rundown community center, pages of grant applications, old news clippings. At the top, a name, Freedom Rhythm. "You co-founded this," he said. Danielle nodded. 6 years ago. It was a dance therapy program for kids with motor challenges. I ran it until the funding dried up." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "And you never reapplied for more?" She offered a half smile. "We did. 3 times, all denied. By your foundation." His fingers paused mid-turn. "That was you?" Her voice stayed steady. "Not just me. Dr. Lenora Mercer was lead author. I was her co-investigator. We asked for a meeting. You canceled it." The silence between them turned heavier. Grayson had skimmed proposals like that before, dismissing them as feel-good noise. He never imagined the person behind the research would be refilling his water glass. He looked up, something flickering in his expression. "You knew who I was the night you danced with Eli." Danielle met his gaze. "Of course I did, but Eli didn't know who I was, and that's what mattered." Grayson leaned back, the pieces starting to align in ways that made him uneasy. This wasn't just about a kind gesture or a rebellious server. There was more. A plan, a setup, a message he hadn't yet understood. Danielle reached into her bag and handed him a small white card. "We still run classes, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 o'clock. First one's free, no cameras, no expectations, just movement." Then she stood, calm as ever. "If you want to know who your son could be, bring him. If not, that's your choice too." A week later, the Bentley rolled up to the curb outside a faded brick building on the south side of the city. There was no valet, no marble columns, just a crooked Freedom Rhythm banner hanging above a dented door and a buzz of music leaking from inside. Eli sat in the back seat, eyes wide, clutching his forearm crutches. Grayson stared straight ahead, jaw tight, wrestling with the fact that he had driven across town on nothing but the suggestion of a waitress. "You don't have to go in," he said flatly. Eli looked at him, then opened the door without a word. Inside, the studio smelled faintly of wood polish and warm air. Kids of all abilities moved freely across the floor, wheelchairs spinning, braces clinking. limbs finding rhythm in unpredictable but joyful ways. Danielle spotted them immediately and waved. Eli, want to join? The boy hesitated, then nodded. Grayson moved to follow, but Danielle stopped him with a gentle hand. Let him try alone. He stayed near the wall, tense, while Eli joined a circle of children. The music wasn't classical, it was playful, unstructured, and somehow it worked. Then came the surprise. A voice beside him said, Mr. Hale, funny seeing you here. He turned to find Dr. Lenora Mercer, dressed in jeans and a loose sweater, clipboard in hand. You rejected our research proposal 3 times, she said not unkindly. Danielle was my co-author. Grayson blinked. This is your study? Mercer nodded. We're documenting how autonomy-based movement rewires the motor cortex in kids with trauma. It's early but promising. Just as he was processing that, reporters filtered into the room. Grayson's spine stiffened. What is this? Mercer stayed calm. Today's our pilot launch. The press is here to cover the program's early results. Danielle thought you'd want to see what your son is capable of. In the center of the room, Eli was slowly stepping forward without help. One brace unlatched, one foot lifted. The room fell silent. And then he stepped, small, unsteady, but completely on his own. The kids clapped. A camera flashed. And in that split second, Grayson saw what no expert report had ever shown him. Possibility. Uncoached. Unforced. Just free. Grayson barely noticed the applause. He was still staring at Eli, standing in the center of the room, beaming as other children patted his back and clapped for his step. It wasn't about perfection. It was about the fact that Eli had chosen to move on his own, without a prompt, without anyone reaching for him. Danielle stepped beside Grayson, holding a tablet. We've tracked progress for every child, she said softly. Over there, she gestured toward a corkboard on the wall. Those are their milestones. First unassisted turn, first brace-free pivot, first group routine. He followed her gaze. Photos of children, each one captioned with dates, little notes in messy handwriting. One frame was still empty. That's for the center we want to build, Danielle added. A real facility, adaptive flooring, in-house therapists, parent support. Right now, we're turning away more kids than we can accept. Grayson's eyes narrowed. So this was the plan, the dance, the meeting, bringing me here on Media Day. Danielle didn't deny it. Number. The plan was to get your attention, but the dance? That was all Eli. I just followed his lead. He took a step back, trying to recalibrate. Everything felt off balance. He had come thinking he'd offer help, control the narrative. Instead, he was standing in a room where he had no authority. You should have told me, he muttered. Danielle looked him straight in the eye. We tried. You canceled our meeting. 3 times. Before he could answer, Mercer walked over. You can walk out now and let the press spin this how they want, or you can choose a different story. Grayson looked toward the glass doors, the reporters scribbling notes, the kids still dancing. In the corner, Eli was helping another child with his brace, mimicking the same patience Danielle had shown him. It hit harder than he expected. His son wasn't just improving, he was becoming someone new. And Grayson hadn't made that happen. He'd almost gotten in the way. Suddenly, every deal he'd ever closed felt small. Danielle handed him a brochure. You can help, but not as a donor buying into a trend. As a father finally willing to follow. A reporter stepped forward as Grayson turned to leave. Mr. Hale, is it true your foundation denied funding for this program 3 times? Cameras rolled. Pens hovered. The room tensed. Grayson looked back at Eli, now balancing a soccer ball on one foot while a younger girl laughed beside him. He took a slow breath, straightened his shoulders, and faced the cameras. Yes, it's true, he said. We missed it. I missed it. I read proposals on paper, but I didn't see the people behind them. Today I did. A hush fell, then shutters clicked faster. He continued, voice steadier now. The Hale Foundation is committing to fund Freedom Rhythm for the next 5 years, including construction of a full rehabilitation center designed by the team already making this possible. Murmurs rippled across the room, some surprised, others skeptical. But then he added something unexpected. On one condition, he said. Danielle Brooks retains full control of the program's vision. No corporate branding, no red tape, just results, the kind that matters. Danielle, standing quietly behind the kids, blinked. She hadn't expected that. Not in this room, not from him. The other parents began to clap. One mom wiped away tears. Dr. Mercer simply smiled. Grayson didn't look back at the reporters. He looked at Eli, still laughing, still standing. For once, he wasn't trying to manage the moment. He was just watching it unfold. And in the stillness that followed, the reversal wasn't loud. 3 months later, bulldozers tore into the empty lot beside the old community center, kicking up clouds of dust and possibility. Freedom Rhythm was getting a new home, one built not just with money, but with intention. Grayson showed up to the planning meetings, not as a figurehead, but as a listener. He asked questions, took notes, even sat through presentations on adaptive floor materials and sensory lighting systems. It was a different kind of boardroom now. Danielle led the design process alongside Dr. Mercer, and they didn't tone anything down to make the donors feel comfortable. They didn't have to. The budget came directly from the Hale Foundation, but every decision was filtered through the lens of the kids who would use the space. Meanwhile, Eli became a fixture at the site, dropping by after school to test ramps, suggest music playlists, and offer feedback like a junior consultant. The staff joked he had the sharpest eye on the team. No one told him what to do anymore. He just did it. Danielle noticed the difference. So did Grayson. At one meeting, he showed up with a notebook full of highlighted neuroscience articles. Trying to keep up, he said with a grin that surprised even himself. But Danielle didn't smile back right away. She watched him for a moment and asked, "Are you doing this for them or for you?" Grayson looked over at Eli, who was teaching a younger boy how to shift balance with crutches. "Both," he answered honestly. And for the first time, that answer was good enough. Didn't need to be. It was honest, and it was real. 3 months later, bulldozers tore into the empty lot beside the old community center, kicking up clouds of dust and possibility. Freedom Rhythm was getting a new home, one built not just with money, but with intention. Grayson showed up to the planning meetings, not as a figurehead, but as a listener. He asked questions, took notes, even sat through presentations on adaptive floor materials and sensory lighting systems. It was a different kind of boardroom now. Danielle led the design process alongside Dr. Mercer, and they didn't tone anything down to make the donors feel comfortable. They didn't have to. The budget came directly from the Hale Foundation, but every decision was filtered through the lens of the kids who would use the space. Meanwhile, Eli became a fixture at the site, dropping by after school to test ramps, suggest music playlists, and offer feedback like a junior consultant. The staff joked he had the sharpest eye on the team. No one told him what to do anymore. He just did it. Danielle noticed the difference. So did Grayson. At one meeting, he showed up with a notebook full of highlighted neuroscience articles. Trying to keep up, he said with a grin that surprised even himself. But Danielle didn't smile back right away. She watched him for a moment and asked, "Are you doing this for them or for you?" Grayson looked over at Eli, who was teaching a younger boy how to shift balance with crutches. "Both," he answered honestly. And for the first time, that answer was good enough. The grand opening of the new Freedom Rhythm Center looked nothing like the galas Grayson Hale was used to. No black tie dress code, no wine lists, no curated speeches. Instead, the main hall was filled with kids in motion, some twirling in wheelchairs, others balancing with braces or hopping to their own beat. And right in the center of it all was Eli, wearing a single lightweight brace and leading a choreographed routine with 3 other children. The steps were simple, imperfect, and beautiful. Confidence poured out of him with every movement. Danielle stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, quietly directing volunteers and calming nervous parents. Grayson found her between routines and stood beside her in silence. "You're not holding him anymore," she said softly. Grayson watched Eli spin and steady himself with only a slight wobble. "No," he replied, "but I'm still here, and I think he knows that matters." She gave a quiet nod. No need to say more. A reporter approached, recorder already running. "Mr. Hale, How does it feel to watch your son take the lead today? Grayson didn't hesitate. Proud, he said, not just of what he's overcome, but of who he's become and who he's helping others become. The reporter smiled. Biggest lesson you've learned on this journey? Grayson looked back at Danielle, then at Eli, and finally into the camera. That leadership doesn't always mean guiding others. Sometimes it means having the humility to follow someone who shows you a better way. He didn't flinch as the shutters clicked. He meant every word. And this time, he didn't need to be in control to know he had done something right. In a world that celebrates power, speed, and control, it's easy to overlook the quiet strength of those who move at their own pace. But sometimes the most profound change begins not with a command or a strategy, but with a simple choice to listen, to pause long enough to see someone else's truth. Eli didn't need to be fixed. Danielle didn't need to be rescued, and Grayson didn't need another title. What they needed was a moment of connection, a chance to lead and be led, a step taken together. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on who you've been too busy to follow. Because real leadership isn't about being first, it's about knowing when to let someone else take the first step. And when that moment comes, it just might change everything. Stay with us for more stories that remind us of the quiet revolutions happening every day, in places most people never think to look.